Hey, Doc Jones here from the Homegrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine, and we're really excited to have you tonight. Appreciate you taking a little time out of your family time and your off work time to learn a little bit. I hope you got your kids with you, and if you don't, then grab them some other night and play this. This thing will be on YouTube forever, and you can watch it, and it'll be in the school as well. But anyway, we're going to be talking about a plant you might have heard of, and that is the dandelion. So I'm Dr. Patrick Jones. I'm a veterinarian. I'm a naturopath. I'm a clinical herbalist and the director of the Homegrown Herbalist School. And this is a plant that we're going to be talking about tonight. But before we do, I just want to remind you, you don't have to write anything down if it's on the slides. Okay, we're going to be sending you a PDF. If you signed up for this course for this webinar through homegrownherbalist.net, we'll send you the PDF automatically. That'll probably happen tomorrow or the next day. If you're watching this, in 2024, then send me an email at info@homegrownherbalist.net, and I'll still probably send you a PDF. I'm a nice fella, so we'll get that done. Really excited to have people here. We got some chat folks saying hi and hello to all of you. We got a Michiganite. That's good. All right. And if you have questions, put them in that chat box, and we'll, at the end of the presentation, we'll go through that whole thing and we'll answer all the questions. Also, if you want to do me another favor, there's a little share button somewhere on YouTube down there. Click that share button. And if you do that right now, all your friends and neighbors and YouTube amigos will know we're doing this, and they can come too if they want to. But we really appreciate, there's a lot of sharing and a lot of that sort of thing that goes on. We really appreciate it when you subscribe and share. That makes everything easier for us. So, all right. So we're going to talk about dandelions, Taraxacum officinale. And we're going to go into a lot of detail again. We'll describe what this plant looks like and how you can find it. I know that some of you are going to be concerned about that. But anyway, let's get started, shall we? Before we do, I just want to mention, like we always do, that drugs and herbs interact with each other. All right. And so if you're taking medications, it's a very, very good idea to not do that while you're taking herbs, unless you talk to somebody that knows a little bit about medications and herbs both, right? If they don't know anything about herbs, they should tell you not to take the herbs and just take the medicine. And if they don't know anything about medicine, they should tell you just take the herbs. But there are some of us that know about both and are happy to help you. So sometimes herbs make the medicine not work at all. Sometimes they make it work lots better. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad, right? So, if you're taking a sedating or calming medication and you take a sedating calming herb with it, then you're very sedate and calm, right? Maybe that's too much. Or if it's a diuretic, you're piddling too much. Or if it's a blood sugar lowering thing, your blood sugar goes too low. So sometimes when they work together, it's bad too. So just be careful. Also be aware that some of the herbs and some of the formulas we talk about tonight are not safe during pregnancy or lactation. You have to be really careful when you got a little bug in the oven, because a lot of the herbs are not safe. And even when you're nursing, a lot of the herbs are not safe. There's herbs that'll cause brain damage when you're nursing. Anything with berberine in it, Oregon grape and barberry and golden seal, those guys, don't take those internally when you're nursing, because at certain stages of your little bug's development, while he's nursing, that can hurt his little brain. So anyway, if you're pregnant or nursing, again, have way more caution about what herbs you use. But the herb dandelion, I'm happy to say, is perfectly safe for pregnancy or lactation. That's the one we're talking about tonight. Some of the kids and some of the other formulas are not, so that's what I'm warning you about. There's just some notes here about general information about the formulas in the module. And we'll, you can read this, just pause it and read it. We won't go through all this. I will make a mention here just of herb forms. You can get herbs typically from herb companies in one of three forms. You can get powders, or you can get tinctures, which are alcohol extracts, or you can get capsules. All right. Powders tend to be the least expensive, and you can do all, and it doesn't matter a bit how you take the herbs, usually. Okay. It doesn't matter how you get them into your body. Once they're in your body, you know, they're in your body, and they know what to do. Powders, you can make a tea out of. You can throw them in your smoothie. You can mix them with a little yogurt or something. Tinctures, you can put in a little water and chase it with some more water. You can put it in some hot water if you want to boil a little bit of the alcohol out. Or you can just take them straight. They absorb very quickly. One of the advantages of tinctures is that quick absorption. So they're great for emergency and crisis herbs. You know, if you're bleeding, it's great to have a tincture of yarrow because it'll soak right in. You know, it's no fun to make lobelia tea when you're having an asthma attack, right? You want the tincture, so you got it right now. Tinctures also have a much longer shelf life. You know, we start measuring shelf life in decades instead of months and years, right? Dry herbs have a shelf life of a year or two versus a tincture, which, you know, if you're old enough to be watching this video, you'll be dead before your tinctures aren't tinctures, usually. Capsules are probably my least favorite way to take herbs. Sometimes it doesn't matter and capsules are great. But sometimes it matters a lot. Sometimes the herb is doing things before it gets to your small intestine. And if you put it in a capsule, your body doesn't see it until the capsule gets dissolved, right? And so you miss half the party. So sometimes I'm not a big fan of capsules. Typical dosing for herbs for adults is going to be a teaspoon or two of dry herb 2 or 3 times a day. You can take it more frequently than that if it's a chronic acute thing. You know, if I'm coming down with the flu, I'm going to take herbs 3 or 4 times a day, right? If I've just got sore knees, I'm going to take my joint stuff twice a day. See what I mean? With little kids, the dose, and with tinctures, I'd say a quarter teaspoon to a teaspoon 2 or 3 times a day. Adults, with capsules, I'm going to do probably 4 capsules a couple times a day. With children, I don't use herbs very much in little teeny guys. You know, if they're not talking toddlers, I'm really careful. And I do it, but I do this for a living. But usually anybody larger than a talking toddler, I don't worry too much about it. And I just dose them like adults. Like, how much of an adult is that? Is that a half of an adult? Then I give them half a dose. Is it a quarter of an adult? I give them a quarter of a dose. Does that make sense? So we're just doing it based on their weight. And I do the same thing with dogs, right? Dogs are pretty willing to take herbs. Very few dogs that have left my vet practice for the last 30 years have walked out the door without a little green bag of some kind of powder, right? Because they work really well. Usually with dogs, I just use the powder and I put it in some wet food and they just wolf it down. You know, once in a while you get a little Pomeranian or something that won't, and you can squirt a tincture in those kids, which serves them right? But most dogs will eat the powder. Cats usually won't do that. Cats are very resistant to eating things that don't taste good. And here's the dosing guidelines for pets. And, you know, I won't read all that to you, but you can pause it and look at it. And again, it's just based on their weight. Okay, what were we talking about? Dandelions, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about dandelions. Let's talk about the taxonomy first. All right, what kind of plant is this? So this is in the Asteraceae family, which is the daisy family. It's a monstrously large family, lots of flowering plants in this family. And it's in the genus Taraxacum. All right, Taraxacum officinale is the species. There's other species of Taraxacum. You know, there's other kinds of dandelions in the world. But the one we're going to talk about is Taraxacum officinale. That's the one growing out in your front yard. You can look out your window if you want to pause and take a minute and go look. That's the guy, okay? The etymology, which is the word origin, the Taraxacum actually comes from an Arabic word, which is Taraxacum, which means herb of the poor, okay? And what the Arabs were saying was, you can eat this stuff, but it's not that great. And most people don't eat it unless they don't have anything else to eat. Okay, that's the origin of the word. They only ate dandelions when times are tough, right? Although we'll talk about that in a minute. And there are times when it's nicer to eat dandelions than others, based on what time of year it is. Officinale is Latin, and it means from the officina. Okay, there was a guy named Carl Linnaeus who was a Swiss physician and zoologist and scientist. You know, in the old days when everybody could do everything. Remember those guys? We're getting a little more specialized, a little too specialized, I think, in our modern world. Used to be a guy who was an architect and a painter and a farmer and everything else. But anyway, Linnaeus got tired of going to scientific meetings and not having any idea what anybody was talking about. You know, because the Chinese guys had one name for a plant and the Germans had another one and the Frenchies had one and the Irish guys had one, and nobody knew what they were talking about. And so Linnaeus said, we have to have a system of nomenclature that everybody uses. And so he went around and gave Latin names to everything. I mean, thousands and thousands of species of animals and plants and bacteria and everything. A lot of things were named by Linnaeus. And we're still naming things in that way. When we discover a new species of flea, we gave it a Latin name, right? And so officinale means from the officina in Latin. And the officina was the little room in the monastery where the monks kept the medicinal plants and other medical supplies. Okay. And so if Linnaeus back in the 1700s found that plant in the officina, that means it's a medicinal plant. And so if you see that name on a plant species, you know, that ought to send up happy little red alert flags that, hey, this is a good one. I got to know this one because it was a medicinal plant, you know, 300 years ago. Most of them were medicinal plants long before that. Here's a few officinale species or officinalis. Look at them all. You know, marshmallow, asparagus, borage, comfrey, eyebright. There's hyssop. There's a lot of them that are officinalis. You know, marshmallow is Althea officinalis. Comfrey is Symphytum officinalis. Calendula is Calendula officinalis. You know, and so if it's got that in the name, it's a medicinal plant. Also, most herbalists won't tell you important things like this, but this is Sepia officinalis, the cuttlefish, and cuttlefish are an important herb, and so they're excellent for removing warts. They have sharp beaks, and they can take those warts right off. Also, they do cupping therapy, like the Chinese, where they attach their suction cups. Anyway, actually, they actually do use the ink medicinally in homeopathic remedies. That's why this little guy, this cuttlefish, is Sepia officinalis, right? Because he's a medicinal cuttlefish. All right. So anyway, that's what officinalis means. All right. Let's do some more etymology. I like etymology. I like where words come from. I think if you learn what words mean, you know what you're talking about a little bit. And that's a good thing, right? So dandelion, the common name, is an English mutation of the French name for this plant, which is Dandelion, right? And Dandelion means teeth of the lion. And what happened was the dandelions grew these ferocious-looking teeth. If you look here, these ferocious-looking teeth on their leaves, and they did that to scare the deer away, right? So the deer wouldn't eat them. So, you know, unfortunately, that's not working out very well. The deer don't get it. You know, I guess the deer aren't very smart. But anyway, it was a great idea on paper. The lions are still laughing about it. You know, so it's sort of embarrassing for the dandelions that the lions are making fun of them and stuff. So they have some self-esteem issues too, which is also unfortunate for such a cute little plant. But they have made up for it by spreading into every yard in North America. So that's good. All right. Dandelions are also, in addition to being good medicine, they're also really good at making rubber, right? Now, this is not a large dandelion that this lady is whacking on with her big knife. This is a rubber tree. Hevia brasilensis. Down in Malaysia, they have a lot of, or Indonesia, they have a lot of these rubber trees, and they score the bark, they cut the bark, and the tree bleeds this white latex sap, which they collect in these little cups. And then at the end of the day, every day, they go empty all the cups into a big pot, and they take it back to the warehouse and make rubber out of it. And that's still how they do it. It's extremely labor intensive. There's no handy, quick, fast way to make rubber with trees. There is a handy, fast way to make it with oil. So that's how a lot of it gets made nowadays. But there's still the real rubber, the natural rubber. They're still making it this way. During World War II, they used dandelions to make rubber. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but when you break a dandelion leaf or pop the flower off, there's that white latexy sap, right? And it's latex, it's rubber. And so during World War II, when we were having a war in the South Pacific with Japan, Germany and Russia and the United States and Spain and a couple other countries all got a little anxious about where the heck are we going to get rubber if we can't get it from Southeast Asia, because the Americans and the Japanese are shooting at each other down there, right? And so they started, all of those countries started making rubber out of dandelions. And sadly, the Germans actually, one of their biggest rubber plantations, dandelion plantations for rubber, was being worked by female women inmates from Auschwitz and from some of the little camps that were affiliated with Auschwitz. And that was very sad. But anyway, they were getting anywhere from 600 to 1,000 or so pounds of rubber from an acre of dandelions. And just recently, about a year ago, a company in Germany, I can't remember the name of the company, but they make rubber tires for bicycles. And they announced that they're going to be making all their tires out of rubber made out of dandelions. So they're going back to the dandelions. So it's good rubber. It's just the same stuff almost exactly that comes out of the trees. But anyway, it's interesting because one of the reasons they're doing that in Germany is because the rubber tree plantations are getting squeezed out by more profitable products like palm seed oil, especially, is the big one. You can grow palm seed oil and grind up and press the palm seeds and make way more money, way faster with way less labor than you can getting drips of latex out of a rubber tree. And so they're plowing down the rubber trees, a lot of these farmers, and they're planting palm seed oil trees, palm trees. And so there's a little bit more of a shortage of natural rubber. And so, people are starting to say, well, we used to make it with dandelions. Let's try that, right? And it still works. So, all right. Okay, so some of the common names, dandelion, obviously. If you live in the southwestern United States or you live in Central America or South America, they might call it chicoria or consuela, which are some of the Spanish names. So the medicinal parts of this plant are the flower, the leaves, the root, and the sap. Not the dirt it's growing in. Okay, but all those other things, yes, the flower, the leaf, the root, and the sap. So basically everything about that plant's medicine. Okay, also everything about that plant is food. We'll talk about that in a second. It has some really important constituents. The latex we already talked about in the sap. It also has a lot of inulin, which is a fiber. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's got a lot of vitamins. It's got a lot of polyphenols and lecithins. It's got all kinds of things that are medicinal. A few of which I've written here. We could have had slides and slides of what's in this silly stuff, but we'll talk about it a little more as we go on. So let's have a description for those of you who may be from other planets and haven't become familiar with this plant. So the dandelion's just a little guy. It's a small herbaceous perennial plant. They have deep tap roots. One of the unique things that's very identifiable about it is that it has no stems at all, no branches at all. It only has leaves and flowers, okay? And all of those things come straight up out of the root base, the rosette, right? So if you look at this here, this picture, here's the root, right? And the leaves are all coming right out of that root, and the flower stems are all coming right out of that root. But there's no branches and twigs and stalks. You see what I mean? So if you see, and you'll see a lot of plants that have leaves very similar to this and have flowers very similar to this, and most of them are cousins of dandelion. But if they have branching stems at all, if they have a stem that goes up and the leaves come out of the stem, it's not a dandelion. Okay, it only is a dandelion if it's doing this rosette thing. Okay, the flowers are yellow. They're composite. The teeth, like we mentioned, have these serrations that look like scary lion teeth to scare the deer away. And that's what they look like. They're always yellow. The seed heads are very distinctive. They look like this. There's a lot of other plants that have seed heads that are similar to this. But that's you guys know what dandelions look like. For veterinary applications, dandelion's completely safe for anything, from aardvarks to penguins. All right. I use it all the time in my veterinary practice over the years, in dogs and in cats. I've used it in my naturopath practice for all kinds of things. And as you can see, this dog also knows that dandelions are edible, right? He likes them. He also thinks shoes and couches are edible at this age, which is, I don't know if that's true, although the couches and the shoes do have a lot of fiber. All right, so let's talk about dosage. For all herbs, almost without exception, about a teaspoon, and I don't mean like a flat, perfect teaspoon, just a spoonful, right, of the dry powder is a dose for an adult, okay? And we're going to do that a couple, 3 times a day. If you're going to make a tincture for dandelion, I would just use vodka. And so how do you do that? Well, you make a tincture by taking, I almost always use dry plants to make tinctures, because if you use wet plants, sometimes there's enough water in that plant to dilute the alcohol enough that it's now not preservative, okay? And then they rot. That's no good, right? And so to make a tincture, I almost always do dry stuff. And I do a 1-to-5 ratio. Okay, so I do 100 grams of dry herb to 500 cc's of vodka. A cc and a gram are basically the same thing. When the French invented the metric system to try and overthrow Western civilization, they defined a cc, a cubic centimeter, right? They defined a gram as a cubic centimeter of water at sea level. So a gram and a cc are basically the same thing. And I know vodka is not water, and I know that none of you live at sea level, and so it's a little different, but it's, you know what, life's too complicated to fuss about those kind of minor details, okay? So I say 100 grams of dry herb, 500 cc's of booze, throw it all together, say nice things to it every day, and give it a little shake, and in 2 weeks you got a tincture. Strain it, bottle it, slap a label on it, you're done, okay? It's not rocket science. The adult dose for a tincture is going to be, a 1/4 teaspoon to 1/2 teaspoon, 20 or 30 drops if you're using droppers. Dandelion has extraordinarily large safety margins. You're not going to hurt yourself with dandelions. You can eat all the dandelions you want. You won't hurt yourself. You're not going to OD, but you will be peeing a lot. So just be aware of that. It's a good diuretic, which we'll talk about it in a minute. Okay. All right. So speaking of edible parts, the whole plant's edible. Like we said, the flowers are edible, the leaves are edible, the roots are edible. You want to eat them in the spring because they're tastier in the spring. Okay, when it gets to be summer and the leaves get bigger and older, they get more bitter. All right, but they're still edible, and in some ways they're a little more medicinal when they're a little more grumpy and bitter. If you're going to, one other tidbit about harvesting dandelion, well, we'll talk about that in a minute, I think. Anyway, you can also roast the root, and it makes sort of a coffee-like nice beverage when you grind it up. It's not nearly as good as its cousin chicory, okay, but it's not bad. You can make salads, you can throw it in your smoothie, and all those things are also medicinal, right? So if your husband won't take the herbs, throw some dandelions in his smoothie. He'll never know, right? Smoothies are a great way to get herbs into kids. They're a great way to get herbs into husbands sometimes. Grandmas that don't like them, make him a salad. He probably doesn't like salad either. All right. Okay, so harvesting in general with plants, leaves tend to be a little stronger in the spring and roots tend to be a little stronger in the winter, because you think about where's the plant putting his energy, right? Spring and early summer are going to be the best leaves. But you know what? If you need dandelion leaves in September, pick them. It'll be all right. They'll still work. Same thing with the roots. If you need roots in March, pick them. It doesn't matter. You do want to make sure when you're harvesting dandelions, if you're on private land, to get permission from the property owners, because these are beautiful little flowers. They're prized ornamentals in some circles. And so it's it's sort of a small circle, right? But it's a little circle, and they love their dandelions, so you should always ask. All right. Okay. The good news on the flip side is there's some people that don't love their dandelions, and they would let you harvest them from their backyard. So I actually had a sweet lady email me uh, asking me for some dandelion seed. And so we can hook you up with that. There, you can buy it on the internet, but I can beat the price, whatever it is. All right. Cultivation of dandelions also has some special requirements. The seeds have to be either in or near dirt, or they won't germinate at all. Okay. But as long as they're in dirt or near dirt, you'll get dandelions. It's best to have children do the seed distribution because they're shorter and they're closer to the dirt, and they like to do it. But otherwise, dandelions are pretty easy to grow. They were actually brought here intentionally on the Mayflower by someone who loves us, and I think for medicinal reasons. So that's good, right? Now we have dandelions in North America. Otherwise, we would have had to go all the way back to jolly old England to get our dandelions. And that would have been fun, but it would have been very expensive. Also, if you are planting dandelions, make sure you're standing upwind when you plant them or the seeds will blow up your nose, right? And that's not fun. All right. So let's talk about medicinal benefits. All right. What are these rascals doing for us? And, I'll tell you what, it's astounding how many things they're doing for us. As I was thinking about dandelions, putting this little thing together, I thought, geez, why don't I put some of that in that formula and that formula and that formula? And finally, I realized, why don't I have dandelion in every single formula I make? I mean, it's the little rascals are good for so many things, and they're pretty easy to get a hold of. And so, anyway, let's talk a little bit about it. So the first thing that we'll talk about is that dandelion is a remarkable prebiotic. Okay, what the heck's a prebiotic? What's a probiotic? It's not an antibiotic, it's a probiotic, right? So an antibiotic kills bacteria. A probiotic is bacteria. All right. So if you go to the store, you can go to the health food store, and you can buy probiotic capsules that have a bazillion little beneficial bacteria in them. And they're bacteria that are normal inhabitants of your gut. All right. And these little bacteria, and it's also, there's protozoans and fungal things and all kinds of other little guys in there too that are good. Mostly it's bacteria. And they outnumber our body cells by about 10 to 1. I mean, so we should be nice to them because they outnumber us a lot. And they do some extraordinarily important things. They support digestion. They help us break down fibers that our system can't break down at all. And if you look at a cow or a horse or a kangaroo or a sheep, anybody that eats plants for a living, none of the grass they're eating can be digested by mammals. Did you know that? Cows don't have a single enzyme for digesting grass. Horses, sheep, goats, llamas, none of those guys have a single enzyme that will help them digest grass. So how are they making a living eating grass? Well, it's because of the bacteria that are in their gut. And most of them have extra stomachs, unless they're horses or rabbits or kangaroos, and then they have extra large cecums, extra large appendixes, right? It's their appendix that's extra large, to digest the fiber that they can't digest otherwise. And the bacteria and the protozoans and all those little healthy, happy guys break down those insoluble fibers and release the nutrients and the vitamins and the sugars and turn the fiber into simpler carbohydrates so that the cows and horses and herbivores can ingest them and digest them, right? And they're doing some of that for us too, as omnivores. They also support the immune system in really important ways. They also support mental health in really important ways. What? Yeah. How do they do that? Well, because most of the serotonin in your body is produced in your gut by the bacteria that live in your gut. And serotonin is the chemical that your brain uses to feel happy, right? And so if you don't have enough serotonin, you have depression, you have a bipolar disorder, you have all kinds of issues. And that's why they put you on SSRIs, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, right? They keep the serotonin in circulation so it gets absorbed by your brain instead of somebody else that doesn't need it, right? And so serotonin is really important. And so then you start to say, well, gee, how come so many people have immune system problems nowadays and autoimmune disease? How come so many people have anxiety and panic attacks? When I was in high school, nobody had anxiety and panic attacks. I didn't know anybody. I was like 30 before I knew anybody that had real panic attacks and anxiety. I thought, wow, that's strange, right? And now everybody has it. Well, why is that? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's because our guts don't have enough serotonin because of all the bad things we're doing to our guts, right? Maybe it's because lots of babies get their mother gets an antibiotic injection because they have group B strep, which is usually completely harmless, but the doctors have decided it's not. And so if you got that, they test for it. And if you have it when you're pregnant, they give you a big antibiotic shot. So when your baby's born, he doesn't get all the normal flora that he's supposed to get. And his gut doesn't get populated with all the guys it's supposed to get populated with. And he spends the rest of his life having anxiety and immune system problems. I don't know. I don't know if that's why, but something's going on. And in the meantime, until we know why things are happening, let's be nice to these bugs in our gut. All right. And dandelion is a great way to do that because dandelion contains some things that these bugs really love. First of all, the leaf contains a lot of sugars and polysaccharides and things that they really like, vitamins, things they really like. But more importantly, the root contains a fiber called inulin, okay, which is completely useless to mammals. We can't digest it at all. But those little bacteria can digest it, and it's their favorite food, okay? So eating dandelion, leaf and root, is an extraordinarily good nutrition source for those bazillions of bacteria that live in your gut, all right? So they're going to make more serotonin. They're going to help your immune system. They're going to help your digestion. They're going to do all the stuff that God put them in there to do. All right. So let's be nice to those guys. And you have to eat it. You can't make a tea or a tincture and do that, right? Because when you make a tea or a tincture, you're straining all the fiber out when you strain it, right? So you're inviting the bacteria to have a snack, and they get there and there's no snack, and then they're just going to be mad, right? You got to leave the fiber in there. So take the dry powder and throw it in a smoothie, or put the stuff in a salad and eat it. I mean, you got to eat the real thing. You can't do a tea or a tincture for the prebiotic benefits. We also have this formula called Digestive Prebiotic. All these little blue links, when you get your PDF, you can click those and it'll take you to those formulas and you can click at them. All right, dandelion is also excellent for the urinary tract because it's a really good diuretic. All right, it makes you pee and pee and pee. And I thought this little guy must eat a lot of dandelions because I was watching him and he pees all day long. It's the most amazing thing. But anyway, dandelions, what they do is they persuade the kidneys to let more water go. All right, the kidney's job, unless you're a saltwater fish, and then they have the opposite job, but the kidney's job, or a saltwater crocodile, I don't know why veterinarians know stuff like this. Anyway, the kidney's job and everybody else is to retain water, okay, to keep water in your body, okay, because dehydration is a problem if you live on the land, right? And so, not a saltwater fish, a freshwater fish. The saltwater fish have the same kidneys we have. The freshwater fish are the ones that are trying to get rid of water, right? Because they're overloaded with water. But anyway, the kidneys are they eliminate waste, right, with water, but they like to use as little water as possible so you don't get dehydrated. And so what the dandelion does is it goes down and it sweet talks the kidneys and said, look, guys, lighten up. Don't be so stingy. Let some of this water go, okay? So the kidneys let more water go, and the result is that you get increased urine frequency and volume, right? You're flushing out your urinary tract, and the consequence of that is principally that you're getting rid of a lot more toxins, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But, the kidneys are a big player in detoxifying the blood in the body. And so taking a diuretic really helps that. We have a formula called Mo Pee. So if you would like your kidneys to make Mo Pee, that's the formula you take. And it's good for a lot of things. We're going to talk about several things that we use that diuretic action for. All right. One thing we use it for is edema. If you look at this sweet little old grandma's foot, see the dent there? That's from the doctor's thumb, right? He took his thumb and he poked it into her thing and it made a dent that stayed there. It's called pitting edema. All right. It's a big deal. And what that means is that her circulatory system is not functioning properly. All right. And she's retaining too much water. All right. And so you can have pitting edema. That's one kind of water retention. You can also have congestive heart failure and your lungs fill up with fluid, right? That's too much water in your system. Because what happens with congestive heart failure is, so if you have a heart attack, you get a little clot of plaque material breaks off your artery and plugs up one of the arteries that feeds your heart, and you have a heart attack. Okay. But congestive heart failure is completely different. Congestive heart failure is what they call a dilative cardiomyopathy. And so what happens is, I'm using too many doctor words here, but what happens is the heart's a muscle, right? It's a little sac made of muscle. And with dilative cardiomyopathy or congestive heart failure, what happens is that the muscle gets thinner and weaker. And so your heart enlarges and it just gets to be this big sloppy balloon that doesn't contract very effectively. And it's not efficient. So the blood's not moving through as quickly as it ought to. And what happens is the blood goes into your lungs to get reoxygenated, and then it goes, supposed to go back into the heart and get pumped out fast, right? That's the job of the heart. But what happens is that because the heart is so inefficient, that the blood backs up in the lungs, and you get this big traffic jam, and they're all cussing and shaking their fists at each other. And pretty soon there's so much blood in the blood vessels of your lungs that the blood pressure increases markedly, and the fluid from the blood actually seeps through the blood vessels into your airways, right? And so that's why you cough when you have congestive heart failure, because you got fluid in your lungs, because the blood in your lungs is too congested and too much pressure, and it's leaking fluid into your lungs. Okay. So they put you on Lasix, right? Furosemide, which makes you pee more. Okay. One of the problems with Lasix, and it's very effective, at making you pee. And if you pee more, if you urinate more, it pulls fluid out of your lungs, right? Because you're got to get that water from somewhere, right? And it's the same thing with this pitting edema. Pulls the water out of your tissues that you don't need. And so that's good. But the problem with pharmaceutical diuretics is that they have a real serious problem with potassium depletion, right? Because the kidneys have a hard time keeping the potassium in if they're letting that much water go. Okay, so you get potassium depletion, which can be very serious. The good news is that when God designed his diuretic, he put a lot of potassium in it. Okay. So dandelions have lots of potassium. Why is that? Because God's smart. That's why that is. Okay. So anyway, you can use a diuretic like dandelion for, edema. You can use it for congestive heart failure. You can use it for blood pressure issues, because guess what? If you pull water out of the blood, there's less pressure, right? That's one of the ways to reduce blood pressure. And so with blood pressure cases, I'll often combine this Mo-Pee-Pee formula or just some dandelion even. So I get both. There's several ways to address blood pressure, right? We can relax the blood vessels. We can relax the tissues. That's good because everything relaxes, you get more space, the pressure drops. But you can also get rid of some of the water. Okay, so I use both these formulas on a lot of the blood pressure cases. One thing to mention with great enthusiasm is if you're taking blood pressure pharmaceuticals, do not take blood pressure herbs. All right, don't combine them because it gets really wonky and your pressure will get really low and you'll have trouble. Okay, you got to pick. And if the blood pressure meds are working for you, do that, because I don't want you to have a stroke, right? But if they're not working or you hate them and they're making you miserable, maybe you need to look at some other options. But blood pressure that's high is very serious. So if the meds work, do that. Same thing with the heart stuff. I've used the Mo-Pee-Pee formula in dogs with congestive heart failure, and it helps them a lot. But I also give them a lot of times enalapril, which is a drug that makes your heart beat better, right? So there's lots of options, and just because one's good doesn't mean the other one's not good. All right. You can also use dandelion for kidney and bladder infections, and for two reasons. One is that it's making you pee more, right? It's a diuretic, so it's flushing out the system. And those poor little bacteria, they're just getting settled in and they're watching TV. They got their feet up and they're all happily settled in the bladder. And all of a sudden this tidal wave comes through and blows them all out into the plumbing, right? And so the mechanical flushing of the system makes it very difficult for bacteria to hang around in the bladder and make you sick, okay? So dandelion as a diuretic is very good for bladder infections. But just recently, and if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I wouldn't have known this, but just recently they're doing some really interesting research that's showing some pretty significant antibiotic properties in dandelions too. Who knew, right? And so it's not just flushing it out, it's also killing the bugs. It's got very good activity against 3 bacteria and several others, but 3 notable ones, E. coli, Staph aureus, and Pseudomonas, which just happen to be 3 very common ones that get into your bladder and give you a bladder infection. So how handy is that? It seems like somebody smart designed this plant, right? Not only does it make you flush the system out, but it kills the little guys that are most likely to be in there. So that's kind of cool. So you can use dandelion, but there's lots of other plants too. We have these 2 formulas here. You can click on these when you get the PDF, but this Bladder UTI formula and this immunity support together are really great for bladder infections. One supports your immune system and one flushes it out and kills the bugs that way too. But anyway, and you could add dandelion to that. That's one. Dandelion could have been in the formula instead of parsley, and it would have been just fine. You know, there's a lot of formulas that make you pee more. I mean, a lot of herbs. Okay, let's talk about kidney stones. There's another thing that dandelions can be helpful for. This is an x-ray of a dog, and you can see here he's got some rocks in his kidneys, and that's no fun, right? So what happens is you get an issue with the kidneys or with the diet or with your genetic ability to manage nutrients and metabolize things. There's lots of reasons you can get kidney stones. And you get stones forming in your kidneys or in your bladder, and they're very painful, especially the kidney ones. And if they get moving down your ureter, which is the teeny little tube between your kidney and your bladder, that really hurts then. Or in your urethra, which is the tube between your bladder and the outside world, they get stuck in there and it really hurts. But dandelion, because it's a diuretic, right? It's going to make your urine more dilute. And what does that do? Well, things that are more dilute dissolve rocks, right? That's how the Grand Canyon happened. Okay. And so the dandelion can be useful for 2 reasons. First of all, it's helping it dissolve, but also because the increased urine flow is pushing things along and flushing things out, right? And so, you know, if you had something stuck in a hose and you turned the water up a little bit, it would blow it out faster, right? Same principle. We have this formula, kidney no stones, which we've used very effectively on lots of kidney stones in the veterinary practice and in the naturopath practice. In fact, there was one year, I don't know what happened up in Rexburg, Idaho, but there's a little college up there. In those days, it was called Rick's College. But anyway, I started getting phone calls from professors at Rick's College. And they'd say, yeah, this is George Smith from the music department up here at Rick's, and I got a bad kidney stone, and Ralph Wheeler from this biology department said you could help me out with this. And I had, like, in one summer, I had about 6 phone calls just from that college. I don't know what was going on up there, if there's something in the water or what, but anyway, I haven't had any since, so apparently they worked it out, whatever it was. But I've had a really good success rate with this formula, knocking rocks out of people and of dogs and things, so that's good. All right. You can also use it for gout, all right? Gout is an accumulation of uric acid crystals in your joints, okay? They're supposed to get piddled out through your kidneys, uric acid is. But if that doesn't happen, they're going to do something and they precipitate out into your joints. And so you get pain and inflammation and swelling and little crunchy crystals in your knuckles and toes, and it's miserable. And dandelion leaf is quite good. So with the dandelion, the leaf is a better diuretic than the root is. Okay, the root is a better liver tonic than the leaf is. We'll talk about that in a minute. They're both good for both. Okay, but the leaf's a little better for the kidney stuff than the root is. So anyway, this dandelion leaf is very good. We also have this gout formula that's very good. Gout, of course, GOUT stands for good overall urinary tonic. I'm not making any medical claims about that, of course. And that UTI formula, the UTI stands for urinary tonic intervention. That's why there's periods there. Anyway, for some reason, people get confused and think it's for something else. But anyway, dandelion's good for gout. But be aware that if you're taking dandelion for any of these things we've talked about so far, for the bladder infections, for the stones, for the edema, right? Any of that stuff. If you're trying to get rid of more water with dandelion, you got to drink more water too. Does that make sense? because otherwise you're going to get dehydrated. You got to have water to flush things out with. Okay. So drink lots of water when you're having these experiences too, and that'll help too, because then your kidneys will have even more water, right? Because if the dandelions go down there and say, hey, let more water go, the kidneys are going to say, what water? We don't have very much water. We're not letting lots more water go. We'll let a little more go. But if you give them a lot of water, they'll let a lot of water go, right? So drink a lot of water when you're taking these diuretics, and it'll really help clean things up. All right, dandelion's also a tremendous nutritive. The leaves and the roots both, the whole plant. And like I say, you can eat this in salads. People eat them, the flowers, they eat the roots. They make dandelion jelly, they make dandelion tea, they make dandelion wine. You know, people do all kinds of things. But it's a wonderful plant to throw in your morning smoothie, just as a nutritive. You know, it's got all kinds of vitamin A and C, vitamin K, which is good for your bones, vitamin C, which is good for your immune system and for your skin and your tissues, which are all made out of, you have to have vitamin C to hook the little molecules together to make your skin. So vitamin C is important. That's why vitamin C is good for cold sores, because it helps your skin button up and heal. Okay. Also, it's a good immune stimulant. It's got folate in it. It's got B vitamins in it. It's got beta carotene, which is an important antioxidant. It's got all kinds of other antioxidants, which, you know, help with free radicals and keep your tissue from getting beaten up by free radicals. The root has iron in it and magnesium, and we mentioned the potassium, a lot of potassium, calcium. So you got vitamin D and calcium. Those are both good for your bones. So if you got osteoporosis, how come you ain't eating dandelions? Let's do that. Okay. Anyway, and the fiber, there's a ton of fiber, which in addition to making all the bugs happy in your gut, makes your guts happy because they got more fiber, so that you'll have better movement of the stool. You'll have better bowel movements. Okay. So throw some dandelions in there. We have this, we have two formulas here too, the nutritive formula and the nourishing roots tea, both of which will give you those same things with dandelion and with burdock. And there's a lot of other kids in there that are good for you too. Throw that in your smoothie, or make the nourishing roots tea is really tasty. We have a lot of really tasty teas now. I don't know if you noticed, but there's a lot of fun teas on homegrownherbalist.net. Okay, so now let's talk about the liver for a minute. The liver is impacted most by the root of dandelion. Okay, so the leaf is more for the kidney stuff. The liver is more for the liver is more for the liver. You eat liver and it'll help your liver. No, it's the root that'll help the liver, right? What the root does to the liver is it stimulates it. It's a tonic stimulant for the liver, okay? And so it encourages the liver to produce more bile and to improve bile flow, all right? And bile is the chemical that the liver uses to get rid of toxins, all right? So the liver pulls the toxins out, dumps them into the bile, which then dumps them into the intestine, which then dumps them into the plumbing, right? And so bile is a very important thing for getting rid of toxins. So it detoxifies the liver. So as a result, it's very good for jaundice, right? It's good for hepatitis. It's good for a lot of other things that are associated with liver. We'll talk in a little more detail about some of those. But, you know, it's a great liver support. We've got this liver support formula. You can click on and buy yourself some of that someday. But it just improves the bile flow, and it's a very cleansing thing for the liver. I've had some really serious jaundice cases in the veterinary practice. And dandelion root is one of the best things you can use on those. It really, really helps. All right. It's also good for the gallbladder for the same reasons, right? Your bile system is also going to benefit because you're going to improve flow and you're going to increase quantity. So things are going to flow better. If you got some goobers and gunk in your bile duct, the dandelion will help flush it out, right? Even if you have gallstones, dandelion can help dissolve those and flush them out. And so that's good. It also has some anti-inflammatory properties. So if you get some gallbladder inflammation, sometimes people get gallbladder inflammation and then their gallbladder is mad and it's sore and it doesn't move as much as it should. So then you get a stone developing because things aren't moving like they ought to, right? You get this cascade of events, and dandelion decreases that gallbladder inflammation too. So that's useful too for gallbladder and liver support. All right. And because of the things we've talked about so far, the kidney things and the liver things, dandelion is one of the best herbs in the world for herbal cleansing. You know, we have this herbal cleanse kit, and I was looking at the formulas that are in that kit and laughing because dandelion's in almost all of them. I mean, there's a lot of dandelions in that kit, you know. So I'm not saying you should just eat dandelions and not buy this expensive kit. You should buy it, but if you didn't and you just use dandelions, that would be really great too. Okay, don't tell the marketing people I said that. Anyway, the dandelion, because it's a kidney tonic and because it's a liver tonic, it's phenomenal at getting toxins out of your body. Okay, there's some other things that you need to do additionally to do that, or you can actually make yourself sicker by dumping all those toxins. Mostly do things in order when you're doing a cleanse. When you're doing a cleanse, you start at the colon and you work your way up, right? Because think about it. If you have a colon who's already mad and toxic, and you have a small intestine, so your large intestine's mad and toxic, and your small intestine's mad and toxic, and then you dump all kinds of extra toxins from the liver because you're cleansing the liver first, well, that's a bad idea, right? Because now your guts are really going to be having a bad time, okay? And so you clean the guts out first, and then you clean the liver out. But that's all. Click on that Herbal Cleanse Kit link, and it talks about it and why we're doing what we're doing and how it works. All right. That's a good idea to do once or twice a year. It's good for your guts. Okay. Dandelion also has some really positive effects on digestion. All right. Again, mostly, but not exclusively, because of what it's doing to your liver, right? It's improving bile flow. When you improve bile flow, then there's more bile to help you with digestion. Bile is very important to digestion. So what happens is your liver produces bile, right? And it collects in your gallbladder. And every time you eat a meal, somebody sends an email to your gallbladder. It's probably a text, which is faster. But anyway, the gallbladder gets the message somehow that you've eaten a meal, probably from the hormone cholecystokinin or something like that. Anyway, it gets the message and then it contracts, right? It squeezes all the bile into the bile duct, which goes right into your small intestine. And now you've got all this bile in there with the lunch you just ate. Okay. And what happens is that the bile is a really effective emulsifier for breaking up fats, because fats are really hard to digest because they're waterproof, right? And most of the things happening in your gut are water-based, and fat and water don't mix, right? Water and oil don't mix. And so the bile breaks it up so that the water can dissolve it and move it around, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to digest fats. Also, we talked about the beneficial benefits of the fiber for the bacteria that are breaking things down and digesting them. Also, the fiber in the root of the dandelion is moving things along. We talked about that as a laxative, right? So the bile has a laxative effect because it's slippery, and the fiber has a laxative effect because it's fiber, right? Also, you can use dandelions, especially the old summer leaves, as a digestive bitter. They call it a stomach bitter. Okay, and there's lots of plants that you can use as bitters. And the reason they take them is because they taste awful, right? Dandelions in August don't taste good, okay? And so what you do is you take the dandelion leaf, which tastes worse than the roots in August. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe the roots almost as bad. Anyway, they're bitter later in the season. You take a little of that about a half an hour before you eat. And what happens is you put that stuff in your mouth and your mouth says, holy cow, oh, what is that? Right? That's really bitter. And your mouth produces, as a result, more saliva, more amylase, more bicarbonate, more other enzymes to apologize to your stomach for sending down this horrible bitter stuff. And as a result, everything gets digested better in your small intestine and in your stomach, right? Because your mouth set all that extra stuff down. So digestive bitters, if you're prone to indigestion and dyspepsia, take a little digestive bitter, take a little bitter dandelion, or you can use this formula. It's got some really yucky herbs in it too that you'll like. So some really good bitter guys. But you can also use that digestive support formula, which has dandelion in it, for all the same reasons we've talked about. Okay. If there's anything wrong with your guts, that digestive support formula is really, really good for just about anything in your guts. All right. Dandelion is also good for leaky gut. It's got some some particular anti-inflammatory properties that really help leaky gut. And I'm not going to spend an hour. I spent a couple hours talking about leaky gut a couple of weeks ago in a webinar we did. And if you're in the school, go look that up. Every webinar I ever did or do or will do is in the school. Okay. And you can download the PDFs in the school and you can watch the videos forever, and you have access to all that material. And so if you're in the school, don't worry about it. If you're not in the school, don't worry about it. You can just sign up for the school. So some of the things I do, we charge for because they're way more in depth and way more work to do. And those are all in the school too, automatically. So anyway, we did this big leaky gut thing and autoimmunity thing. But basically what happens with leaky gut is your gut cell lining loses its integrity and stuff starts getting in to your body that shouldn't get into your body, and your immune system freaks out and you start getting food sensitivities and autoimmune disease and fibromyalgia and all kinds of things. I mean, 100 different autoimmune conditions can be made worse by or completely caused by leaky gut. Go to the website, go to homegrownherbalist.net, and there's several blog articles. There's one about leaky gut. Just go to the blog, look up leaky gut, look up autoimmune disease. Just go through the blog articles. There are 2 or 3 or 4 of them about this kind of thing. Okay. But dandelion's one of the plants that's really good for that. Dandelion is also good for lowering blood sugar. It has several effects. One is it increases insulin secretion from the pancreas. So if you're a type 2 diabetic and your pancreas is trying at all to make insulin, dandelion can really help. It also improves glucose absorption by the muscle cells. So it's not staying in your bloodstream where it's not helping anybody. So it helps with glucose, with insulin resistance. It helps with insulin production. It also, interestingly, dandelion inhibits the digestion of starchy, simple carbohydrate foods. So if you're eating dandelions a lot, your body doesn't break down those simple sugars as easily for some reason. And so you just pass them out. They just pass through your gut. They don't get absorbed, right? Because your gut doesn't know how to absorb big sugars. He only knows how to absorb little sugars, right? Doesn't have any receptors on his cells for big sugars. That's why you have enzymes in your gut breaking everything into little pieces, okay? And so one of the side benefits of eating dandelions, in addition to your blood sugar going down a little bit, is that it has some weight loss attributes because you're not absorbing the sugars. So that's good. This image here is from a study we did where we tried to apply dandelions topically. We would rest the dandelion on the man's head and paint him blue. It didn't change his blood sugars at all, but it did make his pancreas bright orange, as you can see here. But we're not sure what that means or why that's important. But anyway, I recommend taking it internally. That seems to work better than sitting it on top of your head. All right. So dandelion is also good for cholesterol. It lowers cholesterol and triglyceride absorption significantly. Okay. And so it lowers your blood cholesterol. They did a big study in mice and rats, feeding them dandelion. Okay. And they found that the guys that were eating the dandelions had way lower cholesterol, way lower serum cholesterol, and way lower triglycerides. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means you have a way lower risk of a heart attack, right? Dandelion is also going to give you lower risk of heart attack because it makes sugars harder to absorb, and because it helps your insulin get absorbed by your cells. What does any of that mean? Well, why do we have heart attacks? Well, if you watch CNN and read the interweb, it says that we have heart attacks because we have too much cholesterol, right? And the cholesterol gorks up our blood vessels. And then they get plugged up, or the little piece breaks off and goes into a smaller blood vessel. Then you have a heart attack or a stroke, right? And that's true. That happens. But let's dig a little deeper and say, why does that happen? Because if you go up to Alaska and you find a little colony of Eskimos that are still eating like native Eskimos, which means they're eating pounds and pounds and pounds of fat, because most of their diet is from fatty fish and whale blubber and seals and things, because that's all they have to eat up there. Their serum cholesterols are through the roof. And you know what their coronary artery disease is? They don't have it. Well, how come they don't have it? Well, here's another little tidbit for you. When they move to town and start eating Twinkies and cheeseburgers, their serum cholesterol doesn't change very much because it's already high, but they immediately have massive diabetes and massive coronary artery disease. Because the reason the cholesterol is sticking to our arteries is because the arteries are inflamed. And why are they inflamed? Because there's too much insulin. And why is there too much insulin in our system? Because we're eating too dang much sugar and simple carbohydrates. We're eating too much white bread and too much pasta and too much potatoes and too much cotton candy and too many Hershey bars. And it increases our blood sugar, which increases our insulin if we're not diabetic. And that irritates the walls of our arteries. And our arteries say, oh dear, that looks very painful, our blood does. We better put some cholesterol on that and smooth it out so it doesn't hurt so bad. And that's why the cholesterol is sticking to your arteries. You can eat all the fat you want. Quit eating sugar, and you'll have a lower cardiac artery disease. Okay, but the dandelion also lowers your cholesterol, which is good. If you're eating Twinkies, lowering your cholesterol is a good idea, right? Does that make sense? So there you go. Also, by the way, eating dandelions is not a substitute for mice making good food choices. Okay, this guy here, I don't think it matters how many dandelions he eats, he's still going to be fat and have high cholesterol because he's eating bad things, right? Okay, we have this formula here for cholesterol too. Okay, what about skin stuff and allergies? Well, again, this is a liver thing, all right? Almost all skin disease is a liver thing. I'm talking about psoriasis and eczema. If you have an autoimmune skin thing, that's an autoimmune thing. That's usually a leaky gut thing, actually, but which also is helped by dandelions. But if you have psoriasis and eczema, it's almost always because your liver's overworked and grumpy. And so if you be nice to your liver by taking dandelion, which is an excellent liver tonic, or burdock, or Oregon grape, or barberry, or yellow dock, or any number of other things that make your liver happy, but dandelion's a great one, your skin will clear up. Okay. One other thing, which I didn't mention here and should have, I'll put it in the PDF before I send it out, is that dandelion helps metabolize male hormones. What does that got to do with your skin? Well, the reason that adolescents get acne, male and female adolescents, teenage boys and girls get acne, is because when you're a teenage boy and girl, your androgen hormones, your male hormones get higher so that you'll grow more hair, right? Because boys and girls that are adults have more hair in places than boys and girls that aren't adults, right? And so the male hormones, because everybody has boy hormones and girl hormones, right? Everybody has estrogen, everybody has testosterone, and there's 20 others of each, right? But dandelion helps break down and metabolize those male hormones so they're not in your system too long, longer than they should be. And that also helps with acne, right? So it's cleaning up your liver and it's cleaning up your skin and it's getting rid of some of those extra male hormones. And don't worry about it if you're a guy, you can eat all the dandelions you want. You're making plenty of boy hormones. But if you're a girl and you have acne, this can be helpful, all right? Chaste tree berry can also be helpful because chaste tree berry is basically progesterone, which is a big girl hormone, right? And so if you're a girl and you're having acne, taking some chaste tree berry inhibits the male hormones, right? And so that works too. There's two ways to do it. You can get rid of them faster, or you can have the nice lady beat them up, tell them to go away, right? Either one works. We have a couple of formulas for acne. Just do a search for skin on homegrownherbalist.net, you'll find it. All right. Okay, so that's the skin stuff. That's why it helps the skin, because it makes your liver happy. And your liver, instead of sending toxins to your skin to get rid of, which is what he was doing before because he's overworked, he's going to get rid of them himself. So they don't have to go to the skin. So you don't get eczema and psoriasis. I don't know how many cases of eczema and psoriasis I've treated in my career. Bazillions. Okay. And the first thing I always do is the liver. And I have a formula that's called Skin Support, and it's basically a liver formula. Okay. We call it Skin Support so people will know what it's for. But you could call it liver support and it would be virtually identical. But anyway, it's a liver tonic and it helps clean things up. The other reason that dandelion's good for allergies is, again, it's a liver thing, right? Because histamines are the chemicals that your immune system releases to drive things out of your body, right? So you snort up some pollen and your body gets mad and says, get rid of that. And it dumps a lot of histamines. And the next thing you know, you're bawling and sneezing and wheezing and coughing and trying to get that stuff out of your nose, right? That's what the histamines are doing. They're trying to expel things from your body. And so the liver is the organ that eliminates histamines. So if you take dandelion root, right, the root's better for your liver than the leaf is. If you take dandelion root, it'll make your liver work better by increasing bile production and bile flow, make the liver eliminate more toxins more quickly, and your histamines will go away faster and not last as long, and your allergies won't be as severe. Okay. Also, if you take some brigham tea, which is an antihistamine, or some nettles, which is an antihistamine, we have a formula called histamine on the website. Go look that one up and look at who's in there. That's another one dandelion could have been in and isn't, but certainly could have been. All right. Dandelion also has some important and useful anti-inflammatory properties. Dandelion's always been good for arthritis and things like that. And most herbalists have always thought that the reason for that was because it was a good liver and kidney tonic, right? Well, what does that got to do with anything? Well, if you got good toxin elimination, the toxins don't precipitate into your joints and cause inflammation and make your knees sore. Okay. And so if you take dandelion or burdock or any of those other guys that are good cleansers, it eliminates the toxins in the way they're supposed to be eliminated, and you don't have an excess of toxins in your circulation that precipitate in your joints and inflame things. So that's one of the big reasons that it helps inflammation. But recently, very, very recently, there's some research showing that it has some great polyphenols and stuff in it that decrease inflammation all by themselves as anti-inflammatories. And so dandelion has some other anti-inflammatory properties that we didn't even realize were happening. We thought it was just making you pee more and your liver work better, and that's why your elbows quit hurting. But it's actually got some good anti-inflammatory properties. And some of those polyphenols are the ones that help the leaky gut. See, there's a lot of research, current active research going on some of these plants, and it's really fantastic. Some of the stuff they're doing, we're learning a lot of things. And the school, the Homegrown Herbalist School, is constantly changing. Because I've got my nose in these scientific papers, and I'm like, oh, wow, that's cool. And we figure things out. We try new things. All right. Dandelion's also good for headaches. The flower, interestingly. Sometimes, the liver, the leaf and the root are probably helpful too because they're getting rid of toxins. Sometimes your headaches are from toxins. But the flower is particularly good for headaches for some people. Not all headaches, not all people. But if you get a lot of headaches, try it. Eat 3 or 4 of those flowers, and that'll sometimes straighten you right out. Dandelion's also good for warts topically. And how do we do that? Well, we do that by putting the latex on the wart. Okay. I had a little kid come into my naturopath practice a couple of years ago that had a bazillion warts. I mean, all over his hands, mostly on his hands. But he just had a lot of warts. And his mom brought him in because she was worried about him. She thought there was something wrong with his immune system, which there may have been. So what did I do with him? So I put him on the immunity support formula in case there was something wrong with his immune system, because the warts are caused by a virus. They're caused by a papillomavirus. Okay. So if you got a lot of warts, you ought to do something about your immune system. Number one. So I put him on that. And then I said, have you got any dandelions in your yard? And he says, yeah, we got a lot of dandelions. I said, all right, what I want you to do is every day when you're playing outside, stop for a minute when you see a dandelion and break the leaf off. And you know that white sap that comes out of him? He says, yeah, I know the white sap is. Yeah. I says, put the white sap on your warts and it'll kill them. Just do that a lot every day. Just a couple of times a day, put that sap on your warts. And he came back a couple of months later and he didn't have any warts. They were almost all completely gone because of the sap. And basically it's latex, it's rubber. It's just suffocating those warts, right? That's how it works. And probably there's some chemical thing going on too. We'll read that research paper next year, right? Right now we think it's the latex. But anyway, no, I'm going to take that back because I was just reading some stuff recently that dandelion has some very important antiviral properties. We'll talk about that in a minute. So I'm going to take that back. Maybe it is antiviral on the warts. Can't remember if it affected palmavirus. I'll have to look into that. Anyway, but it works topically. the latex on the worts works. But any other white latexy plant works too. Milkweed, sap, same thing. Prickly lettuce, same thing. If it's got white, thick white latex sap, it's going to kill warts. All right. There's also some very promising stuff being learned in the modern research about dandelion and cancer, particularly breast cancer. And so that's exciting. It stops angiogenesis, which is the blood vessels. So when a cancer starts growing in your body, it demands more blood, right? Because it's growing so fast. And so it produces a hormone that attracts blood vessels to come over and feed it. And dandelion inhibits that. Dandelion also increases apoptosis, which is the killing of cancer cells. It does several things that help with cancer. And I'm not saying that if you have breast cancer, just eat the dandelions and forget what those doctors are saying. That's not what I'm saying. Okay. The best thing in the world for cancer is a scalpel. Okay. Stainless steel scalpels are all natural and have no side effects. So if somebody can make your cancer be gone today, be friends with that guy. All right. And then take some dandelions. But as a preventative and as an adjunct, right, to what you're doing medically, dandelion would be a good choice. Or if it was the apocalypse, right? Dandelion, we were talking about viruses. Dandelion also, and this is all new research just in the last few years, dandelion has some significant antiviral activity, which until recently nobody noticed or knew, against the hepatitis virus. Now, how coincidental is that? That one of the best liver herbs in the world also kills hepatitis. Sounds like a fix. Sounds like somebody knew what they were doing, right? And it also has some activity against the HIV virus and some other viruses. It stimulates the immunity in general a little bit. And it has, we mentioned before with the bladder stuff, that it has some antibacterial, some antibiotic properties. So against E. coli and Staph aureus and Pseudomonas and some of the bacillus species. So that's cool. So it's antiviral, it's antibacterial. And, that's great. All right. Just one other really important thing is that dandelions and romance, for any of you very young bachelors that are watching, dandelions are really great for making bouquets for pretty girls. They're much less expensive than roses, and they work every time. It works every time, as long as she's less than 10 years old. Okay. Or if she's a really wonderful woman, and then they still work even when she's older. So that's how you tell if they're really wonderful, that they like the dandelions anyway. So let's talk about contraindications. There really aren't any. Okay, dandelion is extraordinarily safe. Take it when you're pregnant. Take it when you're lactating. Eat as much of it as you want. You won't hurt yourself. The only side effect would be that if you eat really, really, really a lot of it, you're going to pee really, really a lot. So don't go too far away from home. But anyway, some people are allergic to it, obviously. I mean, there's always somebody allergic to something, but most people aren't. It does have some drug interactions. So if you're taking pharmaceuticals, look into that before you do it. But otherwise, for the most part, it's perfectly safe. No worries that way. So just to wrap up here, dandelion is a phenomenal plant. It's not one of the also ran, if I didn't have anything else, okay, I'll use it kind of plants. It is a rock star medicinal plant. Okay. And it is wildly available. And if you don't have it growing in your yard, quit spraying. You'll have it next year. Okay. It's a blessing to almost every organ in your body, to almost every tissue in your body, to almost any kind of a problem you can imagine having. Maybe there's a reason that God put dandelions in everybody's yard. Maybe he was thinking. So one last thing I want to tell you, a special bonus, and that is that dandelion has a cousin called chicory. All right. And chicory is a really cute plant, and it has blue flowers. But you'll notice, remember we said dandelion doesn't have any stems. See how this has a stem here? See that? And this has a stem, right? Dandelions don't have anything like that. He's got exactly the same leaves as the dandelion, but he's got stems. So he's somebody else, right? Anyway, chicory medicinally is almost identical. It's almost identical. The only thing that chicory does better than dandelions is it tastes better. And roasted chicory root made into a tea is one of the most glorious beverages. It's really yummy. And we have roasted chicory root in stock if you just want it straight. And we have 2 different teas that have chicory root in them. If you go to homegrownherbalist.net, and it is really yummy. One of them is called I Can't Believe It's Not Coffee, because it tastes like coffee. But it doesn't have all the grumpy caffeine stimulants in it that you may or may not want. But anyway, chicory is really delicious, and it's really good for you. It's got all, like I say, it's got almost exactly the same medicinal benefits. So go find yourself some chicory. If you can't find dandelions, you can probably find chicory. And if you want the tea, chicory is probably a little better. Okay, so just a couple of shameless commercial announcements, as if we haven't had enough. If you click this link, you can see all of our formulas that have dandelion in them, and there's a bazillion of them. Also, if you want to learn more about dandelions and chicory, we talk about them in this book, The Homegrown Herbalist Guide to Medicinal Weeds. And we also have my other book, The Homegrown Herbalist. You can get those at the website. And we would absolutely love it if you joined us in the Homegrown Herbalist School. The school is very deep. It's very broad. It has an enormous amount of information. You have lifetime access. There's no time limits of any kind. You can do it at your own speed as life allows. You've got a very nice fellow that you can shoot an email to or call when you don't get something or want some help. I'm happy to help you. You know, this isn't one of those schools where we just put the dumb thing up and then never think about it again for 30 years, right? I got no use for that. This is an active, growing, living thing. I'm constantly adding material. I'm constantly updating material. If you'd looked at my wound management stuff 10 years ago, it would have been vastly different than the wound management stuff I'm doing now. Because guess what? I'm in practice all day, every day, and I've learned some stuff in the last 10 years. Okay, so it's better. So we try and improve it and try and do it better. And anyway, love to have you. The other thing about the school is it's about 1/10 of the price of schools with similar amounts of material. And why is that? That's because I would rather make 10 herbalists than 1 herbalist. Okay, so you other 9 guys, come along. We don't care. And we would love to have you. You have lifetime access. Go to the homegrownherbalist.net and have a look at the school. There's little videos about it and stuff. And if you have questions, give me a call. I'll talk about it all day with you. That's fun. All right. It's time for the spectacles. And it's time to read the questions. If I can see if I'm smart enough to make the mouse work for the questions. Oops, I'm still over here. How do I get over here? Whoop. Here we go. Now, haha, look at that. I got it going. All right, so I'm going to scroll up to the top of the questions and everything. Let's see. All right. Someone wants to know if Jackie's here. Are you here, Jackie? Raise your hand if you're here. Is Jackie here? Okay. All right. Everybody's saying hello and good evening. And Ellen says, Doc, you're wonderful, and thank you. You're sweet, Ellen. Thank you. All right. Shelly says she's still got prayers going, and you know what? I so appreciate that. I don't know, some of you don't know, I had brain surgery a couple of months ago, and they had to remove a large chunk of my brain so that I could fit all of the names of my grandchildren in there. There just wasn't room, and so, but they took a big piece out, and now there's room, and I actually have room for 14 more herbs, in addition to the other 300 that have been squished in there, pushing my grandkids' names out. So that's good. Actually, it was a benign tumor. It wasn't cancer or malignant or anything, but it was squishing my optic nerve and making me blind, which was rude. And so they took it out. Anyway, it was about that big. It was about 2.5 inches long. I was growing a Vienna sausage in my noodle. So they strapped me to an ironing board for 9 hours and whittled the thing out, which was a lot of fun. Okay, but I really appreciate the prayers. My recovery's been astoundingly good. And I think mostly because of the good word that you guys have put in for me with the boss. So I'm very grateful to him and to you. And I got to quit talking about that or I'll bawl. Okay, so Mary says hello. Andrea says hello. Everyone's saying hello. Okay. All right, so we're going to go down a little bit. More people saying hello. Jenny says, I love being a student in your school. You really teach in a way that's easy to learn. Thank you for what you do. I'm grateful that you're enjoying it, Jenny. I think there's about 2,000 students in the school right now, and I've never had anybody in the history of the school say, that's dumb, I want my money back, ever. And I have doctors in there, medical doctors and nurses and herbalists that have been through other guys, master herbalists, big shot programs, and spent a lot of money. And everybody seems to be having a good time and learning the things, and I'm learning things from them, and it's fun. We're having a lot of fun. So sign up. We'd love to have you. All right. Billy Bird is our #1 fan here now. There you go. So the rest of you are going to have to work harder because Billy Bird has rose to the #1 spot. Good work, Billy Bird. Thank you. Carrie says she loves the school and loves it too. Thank you. All right. And Mary, who's a midwife and an angel, she says she likes the school. We like Mary too. Okay. Gia says, glad to see you again. You're my favorite teacher when it comes to things of herbs and health, trying to spread the word every place I can. Thank you so much. You're an angel. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. When you guys like and subscribe and share and shoot emails, and I get emails sometimes where a lot of times where I've been carbon copied on some email that somebody is sending to all their friends about a webinar I'm doing. And it just really touches my heart, that you're doing stuff like that. It really makes, what I'm trying to do. The reason I'm making 10 herbalists instead of 1 is so you guys will do the work. So I can retire someday and the world will keep learning about herbs. I don't want to be the only guy doing this. So we're very anxious for you to share and spread the word and be our helpers. It's a blessing I can't begin to explain. Okay. Billy Bird, who is our #1 fan, if you didn't know, says, what's recommended for sharp pain in the joints? Okay, well, there's a couple of things you can do for sharp pain in the joints. One is you can clean up your body, right, with things like dandelion and burdock, and right, that's good. Then you don't get as much inflammation. The next thing you can do is you can take herbs that are anti-inflammatory, right, like yucca, like turmeric. And the next thing is you can take herbs that directly decrease pain by calming the nerves, like valerian.